Welcome to Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton, where we equip pastors to take their churches from declining to thriving by pointing them to a new future and a new hope. Join us weekly for encouragement and practical advice in your pastoring journey.
Welcome back to Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton. And I'm giggling because we know what our subject is today.
Yeah.
And neither one of us want to deal with this.
No.
It's Revitalize and Replant with Mark Clifton. I'm Dan Hurst. Mark Halleck isn't here. He's still in Denver. Something about couldn't get a flight.
And Mark doesn't have a problem with this.
I know, right?
You and I are the ones that have the problem with this.
I know.
Mark does not have a problem with what we're talking about. Mark has achieved it. He has reached the gold standard of this. You and I, we
don't like him. That's why we don't invite him back to this podcast.
This is a tough one for us because this, I was in Jill and I were at Branson a few days ago, and it's this kid that had this T-shirt on, and it said, "I hate morning people," and then it said, "I hate mornings, I hate people."
You want that?
I go. Jill said, "You need that shirt."
You need that shirt.
Oh.
All right, so today we're talking about the subject of patience. I can't even spell patience.
Well, patience for church members. That's what it is. Yeah. Patience with church members. And, again, both Dan and I started out our lives as church planters, and church planters don't have a lot of patience. For you shouldn't. I mean, you got to get going. You got to get going quick. You got a lot to do. But revitalizers and replanters, you got to have a lot of patience. We talk about tactical patience all the time, and you got to love people who are broken, love people who are contentious, love people who've been through all kinds of problems, love people that are on it. If you're Colorado Rockies right now are 8-40 as we do this podcast. It's the worst record in baseball since 1932 or something like that. I would guess that their locker room is not a particularly happy place.
I would assume.
Well, you worked for the Royals for 25 years doing their announcements.
Well,
they're announcing 14. Yeah, you worked for the Royals for 14 years doing announcements. You know what it's like when they were good and when they were bad, and when a team is on a losing streak, it's a pretty unhappy locker room.
It's always the PA announcer's fault.
It is the PA announcer's fault. Yeah, it's true. So when you're at a church that's in decline, people are not happy. They're not happy with each other. They're pointing fingers, and they can be frustrating. And so how do you patient with church members who can be difficult to be patient with? And this wonderful article by our dear friend Chuck Lawless on 7 reasons you need to be patient with your church members and love your church members. And I know that seems like so obvious, but guys, it's not. I mean, sometimes people drive you up a wall and leave you there. I mean, you've had enough of them. Or as Halleck says, you got that guy that's always bothering you, that lady that's always sending you to text in all capitals, and you see her coming down the hallway on Sunday morning, and you dive into a Sunday school classroom or a janitor closet just so you don't have to talk to them. Stop it. You can't do that. You've got to love these people. You've got to be patient with these people, and you can't do it through your own willpower. You have to look to the gospel to give you the love for these folks. And so Lawless writes this great article, and I think some of you listening to this today, this is specifically for you. You have run out of patience with some of your church members. And look, I know some of your church members, and I understand why you've run out of patience with them, all right? But nonetheless, here's why you need to be patient with your church members. Number 1, Reverend Hurst, is what?
It's and this would be the obvious one, and we all go, oh yeah, well, I know that. Do you? Jesus is our role model, and he was patient with his disciples.
Right.
But having said that didn't mean that he just let it slide.
He would call them out when they did things they shouldn't, when they were competing who's going to be the best and some of those kinds of things. He discipled them, but he was always patient with them.
Well, define that.
You could tell he loved them and he had their best interest at heart.
Oh, okay.
And I think what happens is when we get impatient with church members, it's because we want them to do something on our behalf. Mm-hmm. We see them as as a means to our end. We want to grow the church, and we want to use them to do it. And now they're in our way. I remember Henry Blackaby used to always say, the remaining members are not an obstacle to your ministry, they are your ministry. And Jared Wilson always says, you have to love the church you have, not the church you wish you had. And you can't look beyond those folks. And so I think we grow impatient with them because we want them to do something that betters us or helps us achieve our goal, rather than see our goal is to help them love Jesus more and become more like Jesus.
I had a boss one time when I was in radio, and he taught me so much about the business, and he called me into the office one time out of probably thousands. I was always in trouble. But he called me in and he sat me down and he said, "You're getting in your own way." Wow. And I said, "What?"
Wow.
He said, "You're getting in your own way." He said, and he said, "You're just," and he pointed out some things that I was doing. And I said, "Well, I'm doing these because I figured this is what you want me to do." And he says, "It's not about that." He said, I'm only a listener because I'm your boss. Mm-hmm. He said, if I wasn't your boss, why would I listen to you? And I went, ooh,
yeah,
good point.
Yeah.
But his point was that I was getting in my own way by trying to do things that I thought I should do or shouldn't do, as opposed to understanding what it was, the focus of my business. What was it that my listeners wanted? How was I going to be good for them? Now, transfer that over to ministry. What is it that your people need? How are your people getting in their own way?
Yeah.
What are they doing? And as a pastor, part of patience is helping them to see where they're getting in their own way.
Yeah.
And helping them to see that and how to change that.
If you can't, you have to truly ask the Lord to give you patience and develop patience with people, or you really are not going to be a decent shepherd and a good pastor. You'll end up just working with those that are really high caliber, and the rest of them you'll just sort of toss to the side, and that won't do you well. It won't do them well, and it's not how Jesus behaved with his disciples.
Which brings us to the second point.
Yes, which is?
And that is that patience is a witness of the Holy Spirit in our life.
Exactly. In your flesh, you're not going to be patient with people.
Can't.
In your flesh, some of us are not going to love people. I joked at the beginning, and some of you might thought it was a little harsh, but about the T-shirt, I hate morning people, I hate mornings, I hate people. But, the reality is I'm fully aware that I'm an extreme introvert, and I don't relish being around large groups of people or very many people. I enjoy solitude. And yet the Lord has put me in a place where I am to be engaged with people all the time, which, by the way, means I have to lean into Him and let Him be strong in me. I can't do this in my own flesh. Now, full transparency here. You and I are both pretty confident behind a microphone, pretty confident standing in front of a large group of people talking, or you were a great musician back in your day before old age took your voice. But a great singer. He was, man. He had records and all that stuff. But anyway, you and I can stand in front of people, and you can sing and preach, and I can preach. And I don't mean without the Holy Spirit, but we have a certain natural giftedness that we can lean into, that God has given us. But I don't have any giftedness to engage people. I have either the Holy Spirit does that through me, or it doesn't happen. And so it forces me to really, I can't do that in my flesh. And so you really have to, as a pastor, if you can't do that in your flesh, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it means every day you have to rely on Him. And it can only be done through Him anyway. If you do it in your flesh, eventually it's going to become fake and phony, and it's going to fall apart. So just like preaching, you can preach in your flesh for a while and people think it's pretty good, but after a while it's so hollow and so empty that it becomes, so you don't, Spurgeon used to say, whatever your strength is in your personality will actually become your undoing in ministry, because you rely on that rather than the Holy Spirit. So you've got to, learning to be patient with people is relying on the Holy Spirit to teach you to do that.
One of the things that I've that I've learned, and I teach my people this, and I have to pray this every day, and that is that there is no way that I can love people on my own.
Yes.
There's just no way.
No.
And so if I define love, and this is the way I defined agape love, and that is allowing God to do something in someone else's life through me. Well, that's the only way I can love my wife.
Yep.
That's the only way I can love my
Yep.
people. That's the only way I can love myself.
Right.
And so it has to be the work of the Holy Spirit doing something in me and through me. That's what we're talking.
And listen, it's no harder than it is hard. It's no more complicated than this, Pastor. If you want to love your people more, if you want to love your wife more, if you want to love your mother-in-law more, if you want to love the most challenging church member more, you love Jesus more. Mm-hmm. The more you love Jesus, the more you love people. The more you love Jesus, the more patient you'll be with people. So if you find yourself not loving people and not being patient with people, the issue isn't people. The issue is you and Jesus aren't spending enough time together.
Which brings us to this third point, and that is that generally what happens are we discover patience because somebody has been patient with us. God has used somebody in our life to teach us and to model patience.
I don't know how I survived my 30s and 40s in ministry. I would not have.
I can tell you right now. I can answer this for you right now.
What?
Because you had a dad who was patient.
I had a dad who was very patient, and I had
incredibly patient.
And I had a boss that was very patient. Peck Lindsay was the state executive director in Kansas, Nebraska, and I was the state missions director. And I was a piece of work, man. I don't know why he put up with me. I look back in my life now, and when I was in my 30s and 40s, and I woke up in a new world every day. Every day was about me. I mean, and there was a time Peck came in my office one day and they closed the door. He never did that, and sat on my desk, and he just said, Marco, he always called me Marco. He goes, Marco, you want to work here tomorrow? And I was way out of the line of him, and I said, what do you mean, boss? He said, well, there's some things we got to talk about. Okay. And he said, this is before cell phones. He said, you don't answer your calls. You don't return your calls. And he said, so he told me about that. And he said, and you don't listen to people around here much. He said, he named 3 or 4 other staff members at the convention. He said, you know any of their kids' names? Nope, you don't, do you? And he goes, now look, he said, I love you like a son, and I want you here tomorrow, and I want you here days to come, and I want you to be better than you are right now, and you can be a lot better. You want to work with me? And I said, sure. And so he set up this way where he could, but it was kind, it was strong, but I found out after that that some of the people that worked in that building and some of the directors of missions that I was supervising, so to speak, as a state missions director, had told Peck, you just need to fire that kid. Wow. He's just really not doing it. He's not focused. He's egotistical. He's not listening. We're tired of him. And Peck went out on a limb not to fire me, but to be patient with me. Mm. I've never forgotten that. And that was a turning point in my life. And so, man, sometimes being patient is a hard thing to do, but it's an important thing to do. And so, yeah, I can look back in my life, and not just him, but my dad and my wife and so many other people have been patient with me. I had the chance to preach at the Kansas, Nebraska Convention annual meeting a couple of years ago. And I left Kansas, Nebraska. I went to Canada in the year 2000, so I'd been gone 20 years. But there were a lot of people still there that was there when I was there. And so my sermon was basically confession that I know I was a jerk, and I can't believe you people put up with me. And I mean, it wasn't a silly sermon; it was serious. And I deeply need to apologize to you for being. Now, I wasn't a jerk 24/7. I don't mean that. I wasn't like a total train wreck, but I certainly was immature and had a lot to learn. And not only was Peck patient with me, but the convention was patient with me, and the churches were patient with me, and even those directors of missions were patient with me, and the people that I didn't return phone calls were patient with me. And so I'm reminded of that all the time, how much I've been given, how many people have been patient with me. That helps me understand, okay, I've got to be patient with these other folks as well.
Which brings us to the fourth point, and that is that many church members are themselves undiscipled, which means that they are impatient, and you can't expect them to be patient
No.
if you haven't modeled patience for them.
And if you aren't discipling them and they're not in a discipleship relationship, they're not really going to grow. They're going to have more biblical knowledge, but they're not going to know how to use that knowledge.
Yeah, applied word.
They're not going to know how to apply the word. So you can't blame them for that if you don't give them some ways to become disciples and help them realize that the problem we have in our church is a discipleship problem. And basically, if you're the pastor, what are you doing about that? And it's not just another course or another class or another book you study with your church. It's how do you engage them in personal discipleship? How do you disciple some of them, and how do they disciple each other? And what's your discipleship strategy? And the fact that you don't have one will make people even more difficult to deal with, and they'll become impatient with you and impatient with one another. And you know someone when they're really in a deep discipleship in culture is when they are patient with each other, and they're patient with their pastor, and their pastor's patient with them. Again, the way Jesus was patient, the way Peck Lindsay, my boss, was patient, not ignoring all your problems, but wanting you to succeed. The emphasis is on how can I help you become the Christian you need to be, not how can you do something for me.
So your people need to grow. They need to learn patience. But what happens is they are often under a kind of stress that you may not know about. They're dealing with some issues that you just simply don't know about. When I was a new Christian. When I came to know I was 18 when I came to know the Lord. Even though I grew up in a missionary home and I knew all of those things, I'd gone through all the motions and emotions. I'd walked down the aisle, made a decision, and gotten dunked and all of that stuff. But I'd never really come to know Christ. That didn't happen until I was 18. When I came to know Christ, man, my life just took an unbelievable 180 turn. I was in the States at the time. I went back to Honduras. My parents were missionaries there. I went back to Honduras because I wanted to work with my friends who I knew were really caught up in the drug culture at the time. And so one of the ways that I would do that is I'd find a party that they were at, and I'd walk in with a bunch of tracts. I didn't know what else to do.
Right.
That's all I was doing, And of course, boy, you want to break up a drug party. Start handing out tracts, real quick. But one night I was walking home from one of the drug parties. It was dark, and these three guys stepped out in front of me, and it was dark, and I just knew I was just going to get the snot beat out of me at the time. But I saw that they each had a tract in their hand. Yeah. And I said, oh, the only thing I knew to say was, you want to know more about that tract? And they said, yeah, we do. And I walked them back. I was downtown Tegucigalpa, the capital city of Honduras. And I walked back to, my dad was, his office was in the bookstore there, the Baptist bookstore there. We walked back to the Baptist bookstore. Now it's like 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night at the time, which it was closed. We sat down on the steps of the bookstore, and I led those three guys to Christ.
Wow.
And my dad, I was so excited, and I knocked on the door and I said, Dad, these three guys, I introduced them. These three guys just made professions of faith and everything. I said, can I get a Bible for them? Give a Bible and everything. And so there was that. And then we were on the way home, and my dad said to me, he said, the hard part starts now. I said, what do you mean? He said, look, compared to what you're going to have to do now, he said, leading them to Christ was the easy part. He said, discipling them, and he said, because you don't know them.
Right.
And I never forgot that.
Right.
One of the hardest parts about pastoring is that I can't pastor people I don't really know.
Exactly.
And so part of patience is discovering your people and their needs. And one of the reasons we have to be patient with people, as you said, you don't know them. Even though you know where they work, you know where they live, you see them once a week, you don't know what's going on in their marriage. Right.
You don't know what's going on in their life. You don't know what childhood trauma they experienced. You don't know what addictions they may be dealing with quietly. Look, I can't begin to tell you. And you're a pastor. You guys have these stories too. You have 30, 40 people there on Sunday morning, and you first get there to become their pastor, and they all look pretty good and pretty nice. And then over a period of 4 or 5 years, you realize about every man out there has got problems. I mean, half the guys out there are dealing with struggling with pornography, and some of them are struggling with other addictions, and some of them have, tremendous trauma in their life, and some of the women have real trauma in their life. And, I don't want to get... I got to be careful because I don't want to. But I mean, there were times when I would look at people and their lives look perfect, and I would think, if I had what they had, and then I get a call, And they say, you got to meet me up at church. My wife and I, we got to talk to you. You walk in there and boom, you see their life, and it is a total train wreck. You had no idea they were going through all of that. You had no idea that he was having an affair at work. I mean, you had no idea that was going on. You had no idea that every Sunday she was coming to church with him, trying to wrestle through the fact that he was having an affair with somebody, or that she was having an affair, or that, you know, he's been covering up some stuff financially that he didn't tell her. All this stuff's going. You have no idea what people are going through sometimes, even as a pastor. And so you got to be really patient and just assume they're going through some really hard times and be extra patient with them. I think that is such an important part of this article, that you never know what people are going through.
And along with that is that sometimes they're not truly believers.
Well, that's true.
You know, that's one of the key factors.
It's hard to be patient with people, you know, if they tell you they're a Christian, but they're not behaving like it. And, you know, we all know there are unregenerate church members. And, man, if they're not regenerate, they're not going to respond to the gospel, and they are going to be a problem, and they are going to have challenges. But all the more reason you need to just be loving and caring to them, and sharing the gospel with them, and helping them open their eyes, so the Lord will open their eyes and see that they need to Him. But yeah, some of our members, we got to be patient with them because they're not even regenerate. Just like you were baptized as a kid, grew up in the church, and you were probably not the best church member because you weren't regenerate.
But I was there. You
were there.
and I knew the right words, man. I knew how to play the game. All right, let's wrap it up with this final point.
All right.
Is that, again, we're talking about patience. We occasionally, I wish the word occasionally wasn't there because it happens more often than not, we expect church members to quickly buy into something that we've been considering for months.
Okay, here's the biggie, guys, because many of you are talking about revitalization, renewal, and you got all these plans for your church. And what happens is, this is a really good example. What happens is, over time, you got like this dump truck, right? It's completely empty. And over time, you begin to put stuff in this dump truck. The Lord speaks something to your heart, and that goes in the dump truck. And a pastor talks to you, and you get a good idea, and that goes in the dump truck. And then you go to a conference, and man, you get all charged up about something, that goes in the dump truck. And then maybe you talk to a few of your deacons or your elders, and you agree that should happen, that goes into the dump truck. And then you talk to your wife about some stuff, and that goes in the dump truck. And then, again, the Lord talks to you about some stuff, and that goes in the dump truck. And then you decide one Sunday you're going to back up that dump truck up on Sunday morning. You're going to unload it all on everybody at once, and then you don't know why they don't buy into it, because you've taken months or years to get to this place, and then you expect them to adapt to it instantly, and you've got to unload it carefully so that they can handle it. And I think sometimes we lack patience with them because we want them to be exactly where we are right now. And it's taken us a long time to get to where we are right now. We've gone through a lot of stuff to get to this place, and you've got to be patient with them and understand that. So just as to go back, this is so good, and we'll put the article in the show notes, why you have to be patient with your church members. Jesus was patient with us. Patience is an absolute example of the Holy Spirit working in our life. Number 3, remember when someone's patient with you and what an impact that was on your life at a pivotal point and how important that was. So do that to other people. Number 4, many church peoples themselves have never been discipled, and so you can't expect someone who's not been discipled to understand really how to behave as a believer. So you got to help them become discipled. That's part of your job. Number 5, they're going through stress you don't even know about. Number 6, they're not even really regenerate believers, so that's a whole nother issue. And number 7, you can't expect them to buy in quickly. It's something that you've taken a long time to become a part of and become part in your heart and your life. You got to unload it in appropriate kinds of way. This is a great article.
And it's been a great podcast, by the way.
Well, thank you for being patient with us through this podcast.
Well, you're one of the better ones because you're still here.
That's true.
So thank you. So anyway, that wraps it up for us, and we thank you for spending time with us. Thanks to the North American Mission Board for being.
And Mark Halleck will be back in the next podcast, and we'll get back on track.
Well, we hope.
These last 3 have been not all that great, but you've been patient with us, so.
Yeah, but we thank you.
Please don't stop listening, please.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us today on Revitalize and Replant. This podcast is brought to you by the North American Mission Board, where we help dying or struggling churches regain health for the glory of God and the good of their communities. If you found this conversation helpful, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform. To learn more about becoming a replanting pastor or to explore resources about revitalization for your own church, visit churchreplanters.com.